My husband asked my family to never contact me again. It was right during our wedding reception. I, 25-year-old female, was approached by this guy at a friend's wedding. He was all shades of hot, tall, dark, and handsome. It felt like a dream come true when I discovered he was a CEO of a booming company. At that time, my family was struggling. My parents were barely scraping by, and my adopted little brother, George, was relying on me. My 9-to-5 job wasn't cutting it. So when he proposed we started dating, I saw it as a lifeline to pull my family out of poverty. I eagerly accepted, swept up in dreams of a luxurious life. So swept up that I missed all the red flags that he was not good for me. His explosive temper whenever I didn't pick up his calls immediately. He would grip my arm with a possessive force whenever another guy was around, as if he was marking me as his property. His disdain for my family was evident. He wouldn't even greet my parents when he visited and visibly recoiled at my mom's meals. My parents warned me against him, but I ignored them. Somehow, I thought his possessiveness and rudeness were attractive in a bad boy sort of way. And while he may have treated everyone else like trash, he treated me like a queen. He took me on extravagant shopping sprees every week, showering me with gifts that ranged from expensive edible flowers and exotic pets to chocolates adorned with edible gold leaves, fine jewelry, and a monthly allowance that made my head spin. It felt like I was living in a dream, except for one thing: my parents' stubborn refusal to accept any of the wealth I tried to share with them, despite their desperate need. I pushed forward anyway, convinced that once I married him, moved them into his mansion, and spoiled them with his money, they would come around. So when he proposed with a diamond ring at my lavish 25th birthday party, which he had thrown for me, I ignored the silent screams in my parents' eyes telling me not to do it. Without hesitation, I said, yes. He made sure our engagement was the talk of the town, plastering it all over the media. Gifts poured in from his elite friends, and we planned an extravagant wedding in Paris. I even hired one of the most sought-after designers to create my wedding dress. But as the wedding preparations ramped up, something happened that forced me to confront him one afternoon. We went to a fitting for his wedding suit, and my 14-year-old adopted brother, George, begged to come along. To keep him occupied, I bought him a big cup of yogurt parfait while my fiancé tried on his suit. Everything was going smoothly until, out of nowhere, my fiancé lost his footing and stumbled into George, causing the parfait to spill all over his pristine suit. It was clearly an accident. My fiancé had been the one to bump into George, but instead of brushing it off, he whipped around with a fury I'd never seen before. In a flash, he raised his arm, and before I could even register what was happening, there was a loud smack that echoed through the fitting room. George's face was turned to the side, the angry red imprint of a palm stark against his cheek. My fiancé's handprint. He looked like he was ready to strike again, his face contorted with rage, yelling that George had ruined his suit for his special day. I didn't even think. I just reacted. I rushed between them, shoving my fiancé away with more force than I knew I had. For the first time since I met him, I was utterly livid. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. "How could you do something so cruel to a child over an accident? It's just a suit, something a dry cleaner could easily fix." He tried to justify himself, saying that George had been too close, that he hadn't held the cup properly. He ranted about how he couldn't possibly wear a suit that had been ruined, even if it was cleaned. But his words only deepened my anger and disappointment. Right then and there, I told him I was breaking up with him. I grabbed George's hand, ready to walk out on this man I once thought I loved. Fear flashed in his eyes. He realized he had crossed a line, and he rushed to block our path, dropping to his knees to beg for forgiveness. He apologized profusely to George, promising to buy me a brand new G-Wagon as a wedding gift, and even offered George the latest iPhone and $2,000 in cash on the spot. George was hesitant to accept the bribes. But me? I let the fantasy of cruising around in a shiny new G-Wagon cloud my judgment. I convinced myself that the slap didn't matter, that it was just a momentary lapse, nothing more. I made George promise not to tell our parents about the slap, knowing full well that if they found out, they would never let me go through with the wedding. And that was my worst mistake. That slap should have been my breaking point, but I let it slide. If you've ever overlooked something that should have been a deal breaker, like and subscribe for more stories like this. The day of the wedding finally came. We exchanged vows, slipped rings onto each other's fingers, and were announced as husband and wife. But during the reception, my world came crashing down. My new husband stood up to give his groom's speech, and his very first words sent a chill down my spine.
I'd like my wife's parents and brother to leave the scene now.
I was stupefied. My parents, sitting near the front, looked frozen in shock. My husband, mistaking their hesitation for defiance, coldly ordered his bodyguards to forcibly remove them from the venue. I watched, helpless, as my parents and brother were dragged out of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Tears streamed down my face as he turned to me, his voice hard and devoid of any warmth.
I don't want them around you anymore,
he said.
You're mine now. I own you.
In that instant, I saw him for what he truly was, a monster, a man who wanted to isolate and control me, cutting me off from anyone who cared about me. My mind raced back to the slap he had given George. That should have been the last straw. His cold words then, the way he had manipulated me with promises of wealth and luxury. I should have walked away from him forever after that fitting room incident. How had I let myself fall for this? Even as I asked that question, the answer echoed in my mind. His money, his looks. That's what I fell for. A surge of self-disgust washed over me, but it also ignited a fierce resolve. I tore off the wedding ring and flung it at him. I'm done, I said, my voice quaking but resolute. I'm leaving with my family. 7 months later, the divorce was finalized. My only regret is that I had to be married to him, even if just for a few minutes, before I uncovered the horrifying truth that he was a monster. I deserved so much better, and I vowed never to let superficial things blind me again.